Hello and welcome to this omnivorous reader, but perhaps a little less omnivorous than usual, my review of The Three-Body Problem by Cixin Lui. As you may have seen in the YouTube description, I've DNFed this at 31%. It's not for me. I'm not enjoying it. I'm going to mention some reasons why. I would appear to be one of the, 0.001% of the entire human race who's read this and hasn't absolutely loved it. But yeah, definitely not for me. Perhaps it's the audiobook that's the problem. The narration started off good, but now I'm less than thrilled with it. Then again, I also have the Supernova era here by Cixin Lui that I've tried to read a couple of times. I find it hard to get into, so it might be something inherent with the writing style of this author. It could, of course, be something inherent to the translation because they are translated from Chinese, I'm going to assume Mandarin. Anyway, so the three-body problem is a real Newtonian problem. Astrophysics or maths, I guess, could be either. And it can be addressed with calculus tools that Newton didn't invent, but someone later on did. So one of the things I do like about science fiction is how they bring you to aspects of science that you may not have encountered before, or sometimes to aspects of science you're very familiar with and love. I read a little bit about the three-body problem. At 31%, it isn't really a feature in this book, but I'm not going to criticize this because maybe later on you get some actual maths and physics, some actual three-body problem. I just can't be bothered waiting that long during something I'm not enjoying. So the book is meant to be in an alternative past, present and future. Maybe it is. I honestly can't tell. Maybe if you're Chinese, there's some clear hints that this is an alternative world. I saw a couple of things that I wondered about. Back in school, I did I took a module of Asian history, which is relevant to Australia, perhaps more so sometimes than European history. And I did a large assignment on the revolution in China. Haven't read about it recently though. So maybe this alternative past, present and future is how the author managed to write part one and not end up in jail. In the PRC, you can end up in jail for a huge number of things. Any sort of criticism of the public, any sort of description of the revolution, from anything except a sympathetic point of view, I thought was very much a no-no, but this is not a sympathetic. It's a realistic, I would say, description of the fate of most intellectuals under the revolution, which was every bit as horrible as I remember from reading non-fiction. So maybe that's it. At one stage, just before I quit, there was mention of a church I think we're in Beijing now, not that I care. I didn't think that the PRC was strong on religions. In fact, there's good reason to believe it's unfriendly to religion, so the church was interesting. Maybe that's his alternative. Present, I don't know. I don't care enough. What can I say? So what didn't I enjoy? The actual writing is very good and it's nice. It's very detached, emotionally detached, in a way that I don't love, but that wouldn't be enough to put me off. Now, I don't normally think of myself as a strongly character-based reader. I don't have to have good characterization in a book. If there's something else that really makes up for it, I can live without it. If there are good characters, they don't have to be likable. Prince of Thorns, I'm looking at you. You've got good, thoroughly unlikable and unrelatable characters, but I enjoyed the story. The attempts of characterization in this book are woeful beyond belief. Again, this might be a translation thing. Maybe in Chinese modern literature, the way characters are written is different, and it doesn't convert well to English. I'm willing to believe that's the possibility, but since I can't read Mandarin, I have to read it in English, and the fact that it's this bad is unenjoyable, essentially. I know lots of people really loved it, so it's unenjoyable for me. Not putting any of my opinions on someone else. So let's start with part one. Part one I really did enjoy a great deal. And the narration started off good. The names were impossible to remember, so you'd have all... I couldn't... It's a bit like Thai in that when you hear it, unless... You're right there? Come on. When you hear the word that's said, you can't actually catch the nuances in order to reproduce it. I found that with Thai, and from what I understand, that's pretty common in Chinese, especially in Mandarin, so maybe that's it. I did not know, understand, or remember any of those names, but the writing kind of made up for it. You didn't have a lot of characters. You started from the context of, is one of them Jinjen? Something with a J? Something beginning with J? Something with a J? Maybe. Oh. Anyway, you always knew where she was, so the fact that you couldn't understand her name when the narrator said it didn't really much matter. In part one, that was just fine. The high-pitched, nervous narration was fine for basically a part that's all about killing and destruction. There were huge info dumps of mass destruction in the first part, but I didn't really mind that. We're reading in a place that I'm not familiar about things that I haven't read about recently, an info dump or two isn't going to hurt. But so part one, I really enjoyed that. Part two went downhill in a bobsled on a steep slope. It just exhilaratedly bad as we went. We started out with this character who I think is Wang, something like that. He is a scientist. He's not a theoretical scientist, he's an applied scientist, and it's not in physics, it's in, what is it? Teflon? String theory? I don't know. But anyway, he works in a real place that's trying to produce real stuff. Yeah. He's scooped up and taken to a meeting with a whole heap of Chinese officials and British officials and American officials, and he's pretty surprised by that. And that takes us into the core problem of the three-body problem and of the book. So there's something happening among scientists, and the meeting won't tell us what it is because it's Chinese and whatever. We do find out a whole heap of people committed suicide, and at this point the narration still wasn't great. It got worse. So at about 1/8 into the book, we finally got some science. In this meeting, we're introduced to a cop character that I absolutely loathed. Again, it's not a character so much as a stereotype for something to loathe. He's an unlikable guy who emotionally manipulates Wang into becoming a spy for this organization to infiltrate some casual group of scientists that apparently know something about scientists all the way around the world committing suicide. Irredeemably poor characterization. Quite tedious meeting. I bore through it all. I did. But that's where I started to get really annoyed with this book. So, first of all these scientists around the world are committing suicide. And did no one else who read this book find this stupid and annoying? All these scientists, not just in China. If it was just in China, I could go, okay, it's some sort of cultural dissonance that I don't understand. All the way around the world, we're told, they're committing suicide because replications of scientific experiments are failing. Have you ever heard of anything so idiotic? Most scientists are thrilled and excited when an expected result doesn't occur, when a replication doesn't produce. If you're replicating something and it doesn't produce, you've got a paper right there. You can probably write it in 3 hours. If an expected result doesn't come, that means you're learning something new about the world, and theoretical scientists are about learning stuff new about the world. Not in this alternative universe that this guy has created. A scientist who fails to replicate kills himself. Just fluff off. Oh, and here's the beauty of it. It's not only that, the scientific theory that they're trialing had only about half a dozen replications, and it's a brand new area of science. Half a dozen replications failing doesn't mean anything at all. It's like there's no one who read this ever done or read anything about science. Okay, so that got me really annoyed, and I didn't turn on this book for a while. I needed a break. When I came back to it, in virtually the next sentence, I've got the author trying to sell us that advanced science requires the same faith as religion. It's like, no, piss off. You're an idiot. You know nothing about science. The core principles of science and faith are almost exactly the opposite. The core principle of science is that you need to learn things and understand things before you can try something new. All of these things are things that you learn, that you understand, or if it's slightly sideways to your field, other people learn and understand. And yes, you have to accept that someone else who spent 50 years of their life following a discipline is going to know more about it if you're in another discipline. You expect them to know at least about as much about theirs as you know about yours. Faith is belief in something that's never been demonstrated at all. And if that's what you want in your life, that's just fine. But trying to pretend that religion works the same way is... This is the book that took the world by storm? You could drink carbolic acid and come up with better science than this. And there had better be some really good excuse for all these suicides lurking in this book later to make it in any way justifiable. Some non-quasi-religious excuse. Telepathic, cigar-smoking... monkeys on Mars. I don't care, just so it's not this dreck of an explanation. Oh, science is just like religion, and okay, so clearly, by this stage, I wasn't loving this book. Not only that, I'm astonished that anyone did. But, okay, kept going through there. Chapter 6, I was still limping along. And finally we get something that's a bit interesting, a bit spooky, a bit strange science, maybe. There's a sequence with a camera and a countdown. And I liked the concept behind that. But by now we've got the main character of Wang. And Wang's response to it is completely hysterical. He responds to a strange event with complete emotional or mental breakdowns makes no sense for an otherwise adjusted human being. Human beings have got a whole heap of mental contortions for dealing with the unexpected. Wang has none. His hysterical, ongoing, meaningless response can only be justified, in my opinion, if you later find out that he's either been drugged or hypnotized. And I'm not waiting for it because I don't care. Okay, so having had a complete hysterical breakdown because he saw a countdown on a camera, Wang goes off, runs about madly and hysterically and stupidly for a while, and then he goes into a computer game which has interesting science. It's a complete feedback suit so that when you go into the game you can feel cold and heat, you can feel pressure, all that. And you've got goggles, so it's a full immersion game. And I didn't mind that sequence. It was a little bit tedious, but finally it seemed to be approaching the three-body problem that the whole book is meant to be about, and which so far we haven't got any of it. Wang's still annoying, but at least the background of this computer game planet was interesting. By now, though, I've got to say the narration is completely annoying me, and if I ever try this book again, I'm going to try words on page. The narrator has a tremulous, semi-hysterical delivery, which is fine for the revolution, But when you've basically got two people walking across a desert for 30, 40, 50 days, I don't see anything to be hysterical about. And the tremulousness about, maybe it meets Wang's idiotic behavior, but it's annoying. I'm sick of it. And it got worse at around about 30%. Now Wang's back in the real world and he's following up on something. Who cares? And then I turn on the narration and I get what felt like 15 minutes. It was probably only 3 or 4 of the narrator going, dash, dash, dot, 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 dash, dash, dot. As if he's about to have a heart attack. And this is these minutes of my life that I've wasted of Wang getting some Morse code message. And I realized that reading technical manuals is more fun than that. Hell, chewing my own toenails would be more fun than listening to any more of this. And that's when I realized that I'm done. No regrets. I don't like the 3-body problem. There is nothing about it for me to like. It's unenjoyable, unrelatable, doesn't have any characters. Oh yes, characters. So in the first part, in the Cultural Revolution, the bit I actually like, maybe I should just get out a book about the Cultural Revolution. There's a thought. There's a character, she's a young girl. She's an academic in astrophysics. Might be astrophysics. She witnesses her father being tortured to death, basically on a platform, because he was an intellectual who refused to recant. And she's a fairly null character. There's not much to her. But that's okay in context because basically she's a vehicle, an avatar, if you will, into watching this part of the revolution, what happens to people in the following the revolution, deforestation of the land and so forth. And then she comes to work in a facility which is clearly going to lead on to the science of the modern day. We meet her as an old woman. I'll forgive the statement that a woman should be like water who conforms to things because, cultural descriptions of women plus, whatever. But she's gone from being a real person to being a complete and utter stereotype who repeats everything as a means to be cute. It's like she's apparently the local unplayed granny and she's talking to all these kids and she's going, meat, meat. Fish, fish. And when she starts to appreciate Rang, she calls him wang, 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 meat, meat, fish, fish, vegetable, vegetable. It's like, oh my God. Oh my God. Thank God it was only a small portion, but I'm scared we're going to come back to her. And one more meat might just have me vomiting up my meat. Okay. It's idiotic. In many, many regards. My opinion, didn't like it. Many of you out there loved it. By all means, tell me that I'm wrong. I don't think it's a wrong or right issue. Books are what you enjoy and what you don't enjoy. In this one, as an audiobook, there was almost nothing for me to enjoy. And if I ever revisit it in book form, it's probably going to be because I'm stuck on a flight for 30 hours and there's nothing else to read. But if so, I'll give it my best shot with a notepad and pen beside me, and at the end of that I might well review it and say, younger omnivorous reader was an idiot. This is the best book ever. Don't hold your breath on that one. And read good books. Even this book, if you think it's a good book.